Hi guys, welcome to another episode. And today my guest is Ian. Ian's been in industry, for multiple decades, and Ian. I'm looking forward to learning from you both in the sales and marketing. We are new building our businesses, and you've been around for a long time, and I'm trying to help people to build their businesses and help them grow their businesses. Thank you so much for taking the time today.
Sorry?
Thank you so much for taking the time today.
Oh, my pleasure. Nice to be here.
Mm-hmm. So give us a little bit, description. How did you get involved in building businesses, and what you were doing before? What problem you were solving in the market? If you give us a little bit, insight into your journey.
Okay. Well, I started my business career in 1974 with IBM. Mm-hmm. I actually have a phys ed degree and taught school for a couple of years before I got into that, and I knew nothing about computers, as you can imagine. Although I also had a math minor, so at least I had something going for me. Mm-hmm. And I was with IBM until about 78 or 9, mm-hmm. and for personal reasons and that. And then I ended up joining a small company that was supplied IT people, mm-hmm. consulting business. And I had an out with them after a couple of years. I started making more money, I think, than the president. And he didn't like that very much. So,
okay.
I decided I would go to my own. In 1980, I went out on my own, yeah. And doing the same thing. I built mm-hmm. a company up to about 200 people. Mm-hmm. Probably at that time in the early to mid 90s, it was around $27 million in revenue. And then I sold it. And then mm-hmm. I started, because I was a teacher, and I've always liked coaching kids and that, and I love training or, doing that. So I ended up and I started coaching. Mm-hmm. I first of all joined a next IBM friend of mine, and two of them actually. And so we did that for about 5 or 6 years. And then he moved out west and we didn't do it quite as much. And then I tried some other things. One of the things I started was a business in 1999, mm-hmm. which ended up being clobbered by Y2K and then 9/11.
Yeah.
And so I lost some money in that, but we got out of it okay. Mm-hmm. And then I got back into training and coaching again, basically coaching. I don't like to call it training. I like to call it mm-hmm. coaching because training to me is a one-time thing, mm-hmm. where coaching is something you have to do over and over and over again, I think, or I know. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the issues. The biggest issue I see with, and it's in coaching, mostly B2B salespeople mm-hmm. who don't get coached hardly at all anymore. I mean, when I joined IBM, they put me in a 9-month training program.
Yeah.
And 70% of it was learning how to sell and market. Mm-hmm. And the other 20 or other 30 rather was kind of a little bit of business and the rest about computers. Yeah. But basically they realized that, as a salesperson, you got to know something about computers, but you don't have to know the nuts and bolts of it. What you mm-hmm. have to know is what's the value you're bringing and how do you sell that to a client? And so that's where we spend our time on, a lot of time on role plays, which I don't think salespeople get hardly at all anymore. Mm-hmm. And although I'm hearing more and more that some are, but it's kind of hit and miss. And so that's what we did. We mostly work with large companies to start with. Mm-hmm. But in the past, I've been working with smaller companies in the sense that, they're $5 to $50 or $60 million in revenue. They're not startups. Mm-hmm. I don't work with startups because you never know whether they're going to make it or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
95% of them don't. So yeah. There's a lot of people that will work with startups, but mm-hmm. mostly I work with companies and help them grow their customer base within their own customers to a certain extent. Mm-hmm. Which means that, and that's how I started out in the large systems business with IBM. And then when I, had my own business, it was with large companies. I mean, IBM was a client of mine. Mm-hmm. I had 3 of the banks, a couple of the oil companies. At that time, they had trust companies until the banks bought them all out in Canada. Mm-hmm. And so they were all large companies that I worked with. Well, they were the only ones that really took on consultants, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And so I know how to work with them. And but I've broadened out a bit too. I've also done work with accountants and lawyers mm-hmm. and engineers because they mm-hmm. They want to know how to sell and how to keep selling too. So mm-hmm. I've really started to focus more and more on helping companies grow they got to grow their customer base, but grow their customers and do that even if they only have one product. And I've got into that lately with what we call compliments. And I guess the best example of that is if go to a movie theater, your compliment is your popcorn and your drink. And of course now, you're going to a movie theater, they have bucket seats, leather seats. You can get a beer if you want and bring it to you. Of course, you got to pay for that. Yeah. But that's the kind of thing that I've started to work with more and more. So even if you only have one product, I can help you work with building that customer, because once you get a customer, you don't want to lose them. And unfortunately, I find that too many B2B companies end up, they'll give you, you'll get a customer, and then the next time the customer only hears from them is once a month for a bill. Or nowadays, with the way with technology, they just take it out of your bank account every month, and you never hear from them.
Even the billing is automated.
Sorry?
Even the billing is automated.
Yeah. So anyway, so that's basically what I focus on. But I work with all kinds of different companies in my 45 plus years in B2B, and I still like working. I'm in my 70s now, but I live on my own, and so I really enjoy working with people and teaching them. And then more and more, I believe too many people rely on technology to build relationships, but you've got to build relationships, even if it's just like this, right now. But more, hopefully, and very soon we'll get back to face, right in front of each other physically. But this won't go away totally for a while.
Yeah.
But that's the way you build relationships. And we want to take your customer out for lunch, or you get to know them better for dinner and for a golf game or whatever, so that you get to know them personally as well as in a business sense. You got to do a business sense first, of course. But, and so, and I just feel that that's happening too often, where too many clients, particularly technology firms, don't keep in contact. And I know, as an example, if I'm rambling on here, just let me know. No. As an example, in technology firms, you can't call them anymore. You got to either work through a chat box or email. And I just find it frustrating. Now, I've sold technology, but technology's changed so much, and it gets harder, I think, as there's more and more of it. And all technology now has more bells and whistles than you really need. And so trying to learn technology has become difficult for many people. And I talk to a lot of people about that, and they say, what they've done is they forgot about the KISS method. Are you familiar with the KISS method?
Keep it simple.
Keep it simple, stupid. Yeah, because we're stupid, and you as a client, so keep it stupid for us. Sure. But they just seem to forget about that. I find that a lot of technology now is built by technology people without the end user in mind.
Yeah.
Now, younger people all have a lot more technology experience and maybe know how to use it better, but it's still fairly technical. And when you get a marketer or an executive that needs to work with your information and your platform, they need to have it simplified. And I'm finding that I'm just going by anecdotal about half a dozen different technologies I've worked with over the past year or two. And I just find them very difficult to do. And without asking people, going back and forth, and then you get involved in something else. So you don't get to email until 2 or 3 days later. And then you're involved in something you want to finish. And then it's a week later. And then, what was I asking them? At least that's me. And I've talked to, other people who are running in the, same kinds of things. So that's one thing I think we got to look at. And of course, that gets back to the salesperson is, how do you sell it to somebody that, you want to sell it to them so that they get value out of it and they get results out of it. And you got to teach salespeople how to show that value and results without getting into detail. Sooner or later, in a bigger environment, you got to get into detail, but that'll be tech people with tech people. But when you want to, sell it to an executive, and that's what I work with in B2B, you're going to sell to executives. And of course, it hasn't changed in all the time, 45 years I've been in it. You probably got to sell to a minimum of 3 people, and sometimes up to 10 or 12, or sometimes even the board of directors you got to sell to. Especially in times like this when it gets very difficult to get money. You know, in a big, if you're selling a big complex technology system, ERP system as an example, and you know, right now, board of directors are going to, you know, get involved because it's their duty to make sure that what you're spending when it gets into millions of dollars is worthwhile for the company and it's going to be all right. So yeah, that's kind of a rambling, you know,
so
where I am and what you know what I've done. So
what you saw over the years, even the way we built a value in a sales, you know, the way we explain what we're selling in terms of business value, you think that's changed over the years? What do you thought, like, you know, the way we built a business value, are you know, even in the 70s and 80s or 90s, did we explain the business value the same way, or is changed now because of a lot more focus on relationships with the people? Where do you see that changes coming in that environment?
Okay, well, there's two parts of it, really. And the one part you mentioned is the relationship. And let's face it, people still buy from people. I don't know how long that'll last. I hope as long as I'm alive.
Ever.
But, you know, people still buy from people. And that's where the relationship comes in. And it doesn't have to be a relationship in the sense that you're my best friend. You're going to come over for Sunday dinners or that kind of thing. But it has to be a good business relationship. I have an example of that where it didn't go wrong, but it was funny. I had Air Canada as my account way back in the 80s. And I dealt with the chief. They weren't called the chief information officer back then. They were just head of computers, or in fact, one time they called them data processing managers, but they were still the CIO. So anyway, I dealt with the vice president, and I asked him out for lunch. I asked him out twice for lunch, and I'd walk over to his place. I live in Toronto, and their headquarters for the computer group are in Toronto. And I walk over, and he wasn't there. He'd left. And I guess his secretary forgot to tell him, or he hadn't written it down in his book or something. He did it twice to me. Well, I've never had a better relationship with anybody, I don't think, after that. So it's almost as if you should ask the secretary to tell him it's canceled or something. But but that builds, you know, those kinds of things build relationships. But the real thing that builds relationships are working within the client base to tell them what results they're going to get. That's the value they receive. Don't tell them how to do something. They don't really care how to do something. They want to know what results they're going to get. And most people that you deal with when you're selling to something, it's the executive level in a B2B situation mostly, that, you know, they want to know what results am I going to get, which is the value, you know, that they're going to get. And you've got to demonstrate those results. In the same account at one time with Air Canada, it was funny. They were with, I had them with the previous business too. And they came over to me because they felt I did a good job. Let me give you an example of value. I supplied them with people. And they would hire my people mostly on a contract basis. And then after maybe a year or two, we'd work out a deal. If they liked them, they would hire them full time. And I had trouble. At one time, they wanted to get people who are just coming into the industry right out of school. So, by the way, then I couldn't, how I got people then was I went out to the school and posted actual messages on their real live bulletin board as opposed to the, you know, online bulletin board. And I'd keep doing that about once every month, you know, all over the universities in Southern Ontario, particularly ones of computer science. Anyway, so I got them, and at that time, and it's still happening, back in the 80s, late 70s, all through the 80s, a lot of the IT people were immigrants that didn't speak English very well. And so when I'd interview them, and then I think, oh, they seem to be okay, I've been doing this stuff right. Then I'd take them over to my client, I mentioned Air Canada, and I'd say I was losing 50, 60% of them. Now, I had a contract where I was the only supplier, a sole supplier. But I'm thinking, this is crazy. I'm not giving them value. I'm not giving them results I can do. How can I do that? And it took me back to an old saying, if you really want to know somebody, walk a mile in their shoes. So what I did was I said, let me come over when you're interviewing these people and sit in on the interview. I can help guide this person because I've talked to that person, you know, a man or woman. And I understand a little bit and they don't understand, and I can try and guide it their way, because the people that were interviewing were kind of technical people too, you know.
Okay.
So I was trying to get to the value, and that was one of the greatest things I ever did as far as that. I went over and I sat in on, I dealt with about 4 or 5 VPs, and each one of them I sat in on 3 or 4 interviews with each one of them. So, you know, 12 to 15 interviews, but that gave me an idea of exactly what they wanted. And I had like a 95 plus hire ratio after that. So because I was understanding what they really wanted and how they'd interview. And I could also pass that on, first of all, find out if, when I was initially interviewing candidates, whether they would fit that role. And if I thought they did, then I would coach them before they went over there about what they were gonna get asked and that. So those kinds of things, I think, you know, that's kind of like the role play. I was in the role play of, you know, and that's what you need to do, I think, with salespeople these days, and understand all the different levels that people are involved in. You know, you got to deal with technical people. You got to deal with, you know, the people that are, you know, are going to look at your contract and see whether, you know, they're going to get it. They got to deal with executives. You may even have to deal with somebody once or twice who does not much to do with it, like HR, you know. And so it's really important that you understand the value that each person that you're dealing with wants, the results that they want. And that's and it's difficult. The B2B is a difficult thing, as I'm sure you know, if you're in that business too. And so, you know, that's where I think that salespeople fall down now. They spend too much time on process, not enough time on what results am I going to give this client? Am I going to give him or her the exact result that he or she wants? And that's, again, dealing with procurement and IT and executives and maybe, you know, other people, human resources, whoever. So you got to understand what they want. The only way you can do that is ask them, really. What results do you want, as opposed to come on and watch a demo and I'll show you what, you know, how to do this. Well, nobody really cares how to do it. They want the results, unless it's the people who are actually working on it. But once you've sold it, then you take those people aside and get your technical people to work with their technical people. You know, my people will call your people, kind of thing. And so I think that's where salespeople fall down, marketers too, because marketers are trying to drive leads. They've got to understand that process too. And SDRs, there's all kinds of different salespeople have now, you know, this sales and development reps. And so that's where I feel that the training and coaching needs to come on. And it's coaching. Like, people say, well, you know, you can do this once or twice and then I know it, but they don't. I mean, why did Tiger Woods have 3 or 4 coaches? You know, as a and Roger Federer has 3 or 4 coaches, you know, and of course, when you're on a football team or a hockey team, you get all kinds of coaches. They don't go away after the third period or something, after the second period, and say, "Where you go, boys." You know, they keep coaching all the time, and we forget. We're humans, we're fallible, and we forget things. So you got to keep coaching and coaching and coaching, and that's true with salespeople, especially because their situations change all the time, because they're dealing with different people all the time. You know, and how you sell to me today may be different than you sell to me tomorrow, depending on my mood, you know.
You got to learn all the time. You got to keep learning. Yeah,
that's right. And you got to keep evolving and working on the relationship all the time. And it has to be a business relationship. And sometimes they evolve into more personal ones. I've had a couple that have done that, and even had, you know, a client and his wife over for dinner when I was married. And so, you know, all of those things happen. And but real important thing is develop the relationship, understand the person that you're selling to and what he or she wants out of this deal for the company and for themselves. Because they're going to buy on 2. They're going to buy on a personal level and they're going to buy on a company level. I have a webinar I do actually on this where I talk about how to deal with the personal level and the company level, and how you separate the two. So that's interesting.
So a lot of technical people, you know, in our space, you know, either is that, you know, software development or technology people. A lot of technical people don't make it across in a sales. They don't end up transitioning into sales side of things. So what do you think that is? Is it, you're dealing with two different things. One is a relationship, another is a logic. Why do you think a lot of technical people don't make it in a sales and try to improve themselves and learn how to sell as well so they can then excel in the market?
Actually, excuse me, there are a lot of technical people that do go into sales,
Mm-hmm.
technical sales they go into,
Mm-hmm.
and they learn it by talking to technical people.
Mm-hmm.
And so they talk the same language. Having said that, when they're okay talking like that, but when they get up in the executive suite, that's when they run into a problem. So it's not a big system.
Mm-hmm.
Technical people, once you get into the hundreds and hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars for a system, that's when the executive suite has to understand what it's going to get,
Mm-hmm.
what the company's going to get. And so, but there are technical people that do that. One of the issues, of course, if you're dealing with, as an example, lawyers or accountants, and they have different products they can sell, and they overlap sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Your company, as an accountant, you do all kinds of things. You do tax accounting, you do corporate accounting. You may do helping companies invest.
Mm-hmm.
But, and it goes on and on and on. So you'll have different specialists in each of those areas that
Mm-hmm.
maybe you have to bring in when you're talking to the executive of a company or the executives of a company. Mm-hmm. And so that can happen in IT and technology too, like old-fashioned still calling it IT, mm-hmm. But because it's a lot more than that now. But so, yeah, you do need technical people after a while. There's no doubt about it. The technical people have to get involved when they're implementing. There's absolutely no doubt about that. Mm-hmm. Having said that, the salesperson should still be there to make sure that things are going well. Because in any implementation, you're going to have a problem. Mm-hmm. Because you're, first of all, swapping out something that they're not going to use into something new. They got to learn different terminology. They got to learn different technology. And how long will that take? That's one of the other things that I don't think salespeople do well. A lot of people, because they're not trained in sales, a lot of people, they go to the lowest common denominator, which is, what price will you buy this at?
Yeah.
And they're not getting any value from it at all. They're not showing the value, the results that people get. And so the technicians come in and, he said we were going to get this and this and this. Yeah, but you're not paying for that. We didn't. Didn't he tell you? Mm-hmm. So you, as a salesperson, and as you get, you make the deal, you've also got to ensure that what you've told people, you're going to really deliver and hopefully over deliver. And that's when you've got to make sure that as your people in your company talk to the new client, mm-hmm. and even over time, because things will change, you'll get updates and all of that stuff, that everybody's is keeping in touch with each other all the time. And I think that's where a lot of companies fall down is A, they don't talk about results, B, mm-hmm. they don't deliver results, and C, they don't keep delivering results, or they don't keep asking the client, mm-hmm. Here's the results that we promised you. Are you getting them now? And are you still getting them? Well, let us know.
Mm-hmm. Or going back and measuring the result, what they promised, and they deliver it and show them in a measurable way that, hey, we promised this result, but this is how we measure it, and this is what the result we got. So going back and measuring the result as well, what they promised. You think that's one of the challenges too?
I'm sorry, I heard measurement there.
Exactly. So measuring the results. So what we promise a client, can you measure that?
Yes. Yes, you can always measure it. Mm-hmm. There are different ways to do it. Now, it used to be that when you put in, say, a large system, mm-hmm. ERP system as an example, enterprise resource planning system, as they called it, okay. You'd probably help the company from hiring a bunch of people that would do that on a manual basis.
Okay.
So that's the result that they're going to get. But the other result is they're going to be able to do their job a lot more easily. Mm-hmm. Because, they don't have to be on it, especially in today's age, when artificial intelligence, everything helping. So the systems that you bring in will help, hopefully, A, you do your job better, and hopefully not have to hire more people or send it out somewhere, something that you can do it in-house. And we're finding mm-hmm. that more and more now. I know you can do stuff in-house that you could never do before. Mm-hmm. So yeah. And that's why I talk about results. And how do you measure that? Well, that's up to the salesperson to do that. And that's that's where a lot of them fall down too, is if once you tell people what results you're going to give them, make sure you follow up and say, are you getting them? And the other question you ask is, are you getting different results, better results or worse results than what we had first said? So you got to work with the client over time to figure that out. And once you get that, that's where the CRM comes in, because you put all that information into the CRM so that you can A, fix the system, and B, tell other clients what other people are doing with your system that are giving them better and more results than, say, this particular client is getting. So absolutely, you've got to do that. There's no doubt about it. And that's not done. And that's all part of coaching.
Yeah.
Coaching the salespeople to do that, because or they probably called account managers after the sales. So many different levels now. But yeah, and I still think I used to go back. We used to have two types of salespeople: hunters and farmers. And hunters got the new business, and farmers were account managers basically, and looked after the current clients. And I still think they have that to a certain extent. I guess SDRs is the new word. People didn't like hunters and farmers or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I think it makes it easier to understand what a difference between a hunter and a farmer is. The hunter kills what they eat, sort of. And that used to be a big expression way back. You eat what you kill.
Yeah.
And because a lot of us were on commission all the time, straight commission. And if you didn't kill something or get a client, really, then you didn't get any commission.
Yeah. So technology, let's talk about COVID. So technology become very, very important. It used to be nice to have things to work from home. During the COVID, it's a must. The only way to keep the business going forward. So it changed quite a bit. People working from home, some working from office. It's a decentralized environment. You think anything changes in a sales side to communicate to people, build a relationship in this hybrid environment, and also you think selling or building value is changed during this COVID, and where do you think that's going after COVID?
I don't know. Quite frankly, I don't think anybody knows really.
Yeah.
I'd like to see it go back to where it was, where you actually go into somebody's office and call. But that'll depend on the individual. I think for a while, even after we've been fully vaccinated, a lot of us will still feel a little reticent about going out and visiting people, But so I think it'll take a while. Some people are going to work from home. I think as a salesperson, you got to be in front of people because, as you mentioned, you've got to build that relationship. You've got to build a bond with the person, look at their office and talk to them a little bit. Although I've never been a big idea of that, if you came in to visit me and see my daughter's graduation picture behind me, you say, oh, when did she graduate from? One of the issues, I think that's okay on the second or third or fourth call. One of the issues I have with that on the first call is this individual doesn't know you at all. And he or she may only have 20 minutes for your first call. So you've got to get down to business on the first call. And I think that's one of the first things you ask somebody is, how much time do we have for this? If you work with them well, and I have an interviewing system that called the Game Plan, GAIM, Goals, Affliction, Impact, and Meaning, that I teach people to use when they're interviewing first or second time. And that gets away from that, because sometimes when you get, oh, there's your daughter, where did she go to school? And then all of a sudden the guy looks at his watch and says, well, tell me what you're going to tell me. You only got 5 minutes left,
Yeah.
So that's what I don't like about that on the first couple of meetings is it must be all business, but in a personable way. Now you can do it, we're doing it this way, but it's not the same. It's just, it's not the same. And you've got to, the body language isn't the same, and people, particularly if you're on an interview in a Zoom with half a dozen people, and the other people are getting bored and are yawning. You don't get that so much if you're in a meeting where you're all face to face in a boardroom or something like that. I certainly hope it goes back like that. I'm assured it will. I would think that executives in particular want face to face. I ran a CIO mastermind a number of years ago.
Yeah.
with companies that were, well, almost all of them, except for two. I had about 15 or 20 people in it that would come each month. And I think there was only one company that was under $1 billion in revenue.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked them, I said, what's the most important thing in acquiring technology, buying technology? And, they all say, well, a lot of technology is the same.
Mm-hmm.
I got this bell and whistle today, but my competitor will have it tomorrow. So they said the most important thing is the salesperson.
Mm-hmm.
What intellectual stuff do they bring? What knowledge do they bring? Not only of maybe my company, which you should know something nowadays with the internet, but also of my industry or other industries. What are they doing? And certainly, what results am I going to get from this? Not how I use it. I don't care how I use it.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know, first of all, what results I'm getting. So every one of them said that. And I've checked with other CIOs, over my 40 plus years.
Mm-hmm.
That's what sells mostly is the salesperson or account manager, whatever you want to call them, the
Mm-hmm.
head person, man or woman, that comes in and works with them on an engaging basis. They coordinate together.
Mm-hmm.
There's cooperation between the two, and it's a peer-to-peer relationship. It's not, oh, I'm a little young sales guy selling to this guy. I hope he listens to me. You've got to have I guess that's why, when you're 22-year-old has trouble selling to a 55 who has to go along with it and say, he's just like my father. He doesn't listen to me either,
Yeah.
But it is easier, I guess, as you get older and you get more experience, obviously.
Yeah.
Like any.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so you've got to work with them as a peer. But that's the real key. And I think that's true even no matter who you are. Even if you're working with an entrepreneur in some sense, you got to go in and talk to them about their business, not about anything else to start with, but start with them at a certain level, which is the goal level, not the issue level.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've always said, if you keep going in and what are your issues today? Well, where do you want me to start? My personal ones, my business ones? What goals do you want for your business?
Yeah.
And then, because if you don't have goals, you don't have issues.
Mm-hmm.
And executives in particular, would like to talk about goals or other perspectives of their business, and what they want to build. And that gives you an idea whether your product or not or service can help them
to achieve those goals.
Yes. So that's if people are looking at this later, and one of the first things is talk about your goals first, and then you get into the issues, which is what I call afflictions, because it takes in all of that stuff. But once you talk about your goals with them, you don't have to say, by the way, what are your goals? You say, what is it you want to achieve this year?
Yeah.
How does it reflect from last year what you did? It was 30% more. How are you going to do that? Have you run into any issues doing that? So you make it a conversation as opposed to an interrogation, and which a lot of salespeople tend to do sometimes,
Yeah.
And of course, there's still the 80-20 rule that you talk as a salesperson 20% and they talk 80%. And when you're making presentations, that's not necessarily true. But when the first 2 or 3 meetings with an individual, that's really what you got to do. So there's just
So you got to work on listening skills more than talking.
Sorry?
You got to work on listening skills more than talking in a sales.
Absolutely. Yeah, you got to be an active listener. You got to make sure you're listening. I've always emphasized to take notes too when you're as a salesperson, irrespective of how much thing you got, unless you got a photographic memory, which I don't.
Yeah.
So I always made sure I took notes. And as you can see, if I didn't hear or understand, I'll ask them to repeat it, and they don't mind. And I think a lot of people, if you're saying something to somebody and they're writing stuff down, you think, oh, I guess this guy thinks I'm important. This kid thinks I'm important. I better write it down. But yeah. So it's always. I learned that right at first day at IBM. I think. Hey, get your note paper ready because you're going to take notes on everybody.
So let's talk about organizations. When we talk into a company, either decision makers or business leaders, other side, Ian. I'm not sure before, but now technology is so integrated. There's so many dependencies in technology. There's so many pieces that you gotta get a handle on. So every time you're selling something or business leaders are buying something, it translates into change in their company. Either they gotta change the way people behave, they gotta change something. So technology always drives a change in industry. Where do you think the challenges comes in? A lot of people, a lot of business leaders I'm talking to, they're hesitant about the change. So change is a big thing. If I buy this little piece of equipment or buy software, I'm going to have to manage my people. I have to communicate back. It's going to change the way I run a business today. So what do you think the challenges are that, people a little bit hesitant about taking a change in industry? Did you see those challenges even before, before COVID? What are your thoughts on the change management side?
Yeah, that's really important. Really, really important.
Okay.
Let me give you a little story on that.
Okay.
One of the CIOs I had work with me, I was also working with a technology company at the same time. And I got talking to him and he said, we're having trouble as usual, where the people who are in the business side are having trouble talking to the technology side. Mm-hmm. So, and I found that with a lot of people, and it's still going on, I'm sure, a lot of times. And so I had this client that had a really neat piece of technology, which helped the technology people talk to the business people. I can't remember what it was now or how it worked, but I just remember that was the value of it. It broke it down and they could ask questions, the right questions and that. And so I took it and I talked to the CIO. He says, yeah, come on in. He says, I'll get my manager who's in charge of that particular department. You bring in your client. And so the manager also brought two people with him who were really on the day-to-day part of it. They were two women. Now, I still remember a situation. That was a number of years ago. Mm-hmm. We went in and this guy gave a presentation and the manager, I just for reference sake, was probably in his early 60s. Yeah. The two women that worked for him were, they were, I don't know, they're in their 30s or 40s, but they always had trouble talking to them. And when we showed a demonstration of this and how it worked and the results that they would get and the value, they thought it was fantastic. Mm. And so it looked really, really good. And, we were probably going to make the sale. So a couple of days later, I called my contact, the CIO, and asked about his manager said, no, or he did it a little bit in the presentation. This won't work. I don't see it working, et cetera. So the biggest reason I felt that it didn't work, and I confirmed it with the CIO, was this guy was 62 or 3. Mm-hmm. He put in his time about developing and getting new systems in. And there was no way he was going to work weekends and late nights when he had 2 or 3 years left to retirement. He was going to coast it to the end. So you have to understand what the people you're selling to, what they might be. And that's, that's all part of that. And so the other side of it is you have to tell them what issues they're going to run up against. Mm-hmm. And that's the first one. You say, hey, look, this is going to be disruptive for X months, 3 months, let's say, where you're going to have to work some nights and weekends. Hopefully after that, they'll give you some time off your company. But in essence, if you want to get this thing in by this time frame, this is what you have to do. Now, some of that's been cut down now because of AI or whatever. But you've got to say that. And here's how we're going to help you. So here's what the issue is. It's going to take a time. And here's what we're going to do. I've got 5 team members that are going to come in. They're going to interface with the 5 team members that use this, your system, and our system's going to replace it. So my 5 team members are going to interface with your 5 or 2 or 8 or whatever the number is. And here's how much time we usually find it takes to get it up and running properly, teaching everybody how to use it, ensuring they're getting the results that you want. So let's say it's 3 months, and so you're going to have disruption to your business. And what if we can, I'll get you in touch with our clients now who've put this in and let you know what they've been through. It's interesting. Just a quick aside on that too. 2 of the CIOs I had, I think it was only 2 at the time. They became really close to you. All of them have, because I ran the CIO thing for 4 years, so they all became fairly close. But they would interchange their people. So 3 or 4 people from one office would go over to the 3. Hey, we're doing this. Why don't you send them over? They go over there for a week, 3 or 4 days or a week, and figure out what's going on. And that was another real benefit of this group. And so that's the kind of thing that, we're going to come in and work with your people, teach them how to do it, ensure that they know what they're doing, go through tests before we go live. and we'll show you the value you're going to get. So yeah, that's very important, is to let people know what the disruption is going to be and how long it's going to take, but always emphasizing here's what you're going to get out of it. So
Yeah.
did that answer your question?
Yeah, no, definitely. You did. So how do people manage those in the impact on a business? So now these days, impact is very minimum. Sometimes it could be more. It depends on what you're working with, right? But it impacts people's behavior. Is how people use technology. Was training always a big part of it? Every time you make a changes in a technology, that it could train a lot of people, or is it training getting bigger and bigger? That's something we saw in a COVID, that you could make a change in the technology, but now you have to train people at home. You have to train in the office as well. So because a lot of people are working from home, so you have to deliver training and hand holding to their homes wherever they're working from, not only in office. So was that training that critical before? It just got critical in a COVID.
Sorry, it's critical if you want to sell your system. Sure, it is. Yeah. I haven't, I've trained some people. It's not like technology. I'm training them to do, and I do role plays with them over Zoom. And so, that's part of the training too. And it's not quite the same. It's interesting looking at ourselves when we're in this thing too,
Yeah.
You got to watch where you scratch. But there's going to be differences. There's no doubt about it. And that's why I think, the things have to get back to some sort of what we had before, whatever the normal is. But it may not go all the way back, but it's much easier to teach people in a group, and particularly if it's hands-on. If I've got to do something, let me do it. But now it's mostly on a keyboard. But if you've got to do anything else, to train, then it's got to be done. So, like I train, when I train people, I haven't done any in Zoom. So it's mostly coaching one-on-one now. A lot of times when I train salespeople, as an example, I'll go one-on-one with one person on a role play and have 3 or 4 other people watching the role play and taking notes. And I have a script, a form that they fill out. And then we all give back our feedback to individuals. But you can still do that, in Zoom. But yeah, it's more difficult. I mean, there's no doubt about it. It's more difficult. But on the flip side of that, you've also got to ensure that what you're saying, you've got to be very clear about it, and you've got to be very clear about what the pitfalls are, the issues are that people are going to run into. We keep reinforcing them and make sure that you probably have to come back more often, because you're not working side by side to them in the same sense that you would, when you're actually physically side by side with them. So it probably takes a bit longer.
Yeah,
I'm finding that with with training some salespeople, it takes a bit longer on this. Because most of the people are fed up with Zoom, first of all, or whatever they're using, fed up being on this thing all day long, everybody I talk to. So there is it's taking longer. I'm sure you're finding that too, probably, right?
Either that, or also the other part of always is time consuming for business leaders is building a sales teams. How you coach people, how you train people on those, and finding the right people, and training them, and maintaining the talent over the long time as well. So do you help out business leaders in that regard as well, building a sales team and ramping up and training on a daily basis, or is it simply just training of business leaders?
I've been mostly doing it when they've hired, although I certainly, what I do when I start coaching people is I'll tell usually the CEO, the president or owner of the company, whether that person's going to make it or not, whether they made a good hire or not. Because when I am coaching, I do role plays a lot, and the role plays can tell me, I can't tell whether a person's going to be successful. You can't measure how much effort they're going to put in. It's a very difficult thing to measure. The only way you can probably do that is by getting references. How did they reference before? But people don't want to, when they're looking for another job, they don't really want to tell you call my manager up. He'll love to know that I'm looking for another job. So it's tough to do. But some of the role plays, most of the role plays I get at, I have a way of doing that. And since I've been around it a long time and hired a lot and helped people hire salespeople, I know. But there is a way to do that, and most of it's through role plays and understanding if they get through the the steps that they need to do, and they do things well or can learn easily, and they want to. But it's really hard to tell motivation. It's really tough to measure motivation until you see it happening, And the only way you can do that is either get references, as I said, but if you're hiring somebody new, that's tough to do. Or I think there are some tests out now where you can measure motivation. I haven't looked into them that much, but
Disc profile is one. There's one called disc profile. So you can profile, the motives and their drivers and their personality testing and that kind of stuff. You can do some of that stuff.
I know they have that, but there's a lot of smart people out there who get around that stuff too. So that's the hardest part, is how motivated they are. I mean, I always like to hire people who usually competed in sports, or if they're musically inclined, like to do concerts, because they're motivated to go further than just do it. They're motivated to work. If it's sports in particular, if they were a team player, played hockey or rugby. I played rugby for a long time. That they can work in a team well, and they're competitive. I always wanted somebody who was competitive. Whoops, hang on. Sorry.
That's okay.
Forgot to turn that off. So I still think it's hard. I think a test can do it. It's just almost like an IQ test. We've probably all had one of those, but does it really measure how intelligent you are? Well, it does in a certain area, but not other areas. So there are certain things that I still think are, and motivation is one of them. Although I know they do have tests out now that work. I haven't used any of them, but I've usually done it by interviews and also by references. It may not be a past reference or the exact past they're working for now, but somebody else in the past, in another company. So yeah. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, definitely. It's a challenge. I think every sales professionals go through that. Definitely you have to maintain your attitude. You have to keep energy high on an ongoing, on a consistent basis. It's a discipline around, your profession. And I think that there's a shortage of that. A lot of people don't do that. You can do few checkups, with the references for the point you hire, but over the time, all sales professionals, they have to learn, they have to maintain the energy level, they have to keep that attitude, upbeat, so they can make some contribution. And that's where I think your role play comes in. That's what you're teaching in a role play. I take it that to maintain that over time, right?
Yes, you can. Yeah, they can learn it. I mean, motivation, we have almost everybody has motivation, but what makes them motivated, or what are they motivated wanting to do? If they don't really, then maybe they're in sales because they couldn't get a job doing anything else and they'd like to get some money somewhere. So that's not real motivation. But if you really, really like working with people and you like the idea of showing people, and it's become easier and easier now, I think, but showing people what results they can get by working with your product, that's where some technical people come in too when they're selling. Is that they can do that, and especially if a accountant starts selling to accountants or something, to other accounting firms, that kind of thing, or an engineer to an engineering firm. So because they can relate to the technical people, but salespeople have to be trained, and it's the most important person in a company, because if you don't have customers, you don't have a business.
What are you doing?
And salespeople bring in customers. So that's why I say it's the most important. A lot of people think it's the people who develop the technology, but if nobody's using your technology, then you don't have a business. So, and I just think there needs to be more training.
Well, salespeople keep the top line going, right?
Right.
If you're not growing your top line, what else are you doing in a business, right?
And if they sell value, they'll keep the bottom line going too.
Yeah.
And that's what I've been really emphasizing, and always emphasize, from working with IBM before, and I've always taught that. It's just been instilled in me. When you do it for 9 months and then it's instilled, and you just didn't do it. You had to do it for 5 years after that. You had to have there was always IBM always had you do 2 weeks of training every year, no matter how long you'd been at the company. And if you're a salesperson, at least one of those weeks was doing role plays and having somebody else measure. It was a manager, another salesperson. And, the other part was learning the different sort of products that they had. And, because they're always bringing out new products. Any big company is, most companies. So, yeah, but that was mandatory. You could not get out of that. And the other thing they had, which was interesting, if somebody had just bought another a competitor's product, you could not talk to that company for a year. And if you did, you were fired on the spot.
Wow. Interesting. So what's the rationale behind it? Why can't you, because they can figure out in a couple of months that is this working or not for them?
Well, yeah. And if they called you because you were in on the initial, you were one of the vendors in on that, and they called you, then that's different. But they just said that, these people have to learn the product they bought, and we're not going to keep bothering them that it's bad. Let them figure it out on their own. It was a year. It was just a policy they had, and it worked for them. I don't know if anybody has that policy now. But, it was Tom Watson's scruples, I guess, to a certain extent, the founder of IBM. And so, yeah, I always found that interesting that you couldn't go talk to them. They just, for a year, they just said, hey, mark it in your calendar a year later and then give them a call. Now, if they called you, absolutely, then that was a different story. They said, hey, this isn't working for us. Come on back in and talk to us again.
I see.
We didn't lose a lot of business, though, back then either. So,
yeah, it was a different market.
Yeah.
So any specific tech companies you work with, Ian, to help them out, or any, there's so many different tech companies, and in Toronto we are tech hub right now. Any specific area you work with, or any company that deal with the technology that you help them grow?
Well, as I said, I don't work with startups. I found I'm not very good at working with startups, even though I've started 3 companies. Okay. Because I don't know if their product will work. When I say I've started 3 companies, I knew the product and the service worked. They're mostly service companies. I work with companies, as I said, usually a minimum of 5 million and up to maybe even up to 100 million. I mean, or I could work with billion-dollar companies. And what you do is you work with teams, and that ends up working with the whole company. But yeah, I'm sorry. What was it? What was your exact question?
Any specific company? You only work with the tech companies, right? You don't work with any other industry.
No, I do. I work with service companies. As I mentioned, I work with engineering companies.
I see.
With accountants, with lawyers. Okay. Because when I had my consulting business, and I work with consulting companies too, that was a service business more than anything. I found even my IBM business was a service. And if you look at your company, even though it's a product, as a service company, then that's what you're there to do, is to serve your clients. And you're not just there to get them a product. If it's you're selling nuts and bolts, that's different. It's just you don't really care. But if you're selling them a system that they have to use every day, or a service that they have to use a lot of, and it's integral to them being a good business, and having a good business and helping them with their business, then you've got to be there helping them too. You've got to make sure you're on the ball with them, and you just can't send them an invoice every month and ignore them. And I find that the other thing we did that I learned at IBM, and I did with all my accounts, is that even though in coaching I'm there more often, obviously, but when I teach clients, is you got to be talking to the people that are paying the bills, because you're probably not working with them on a day-to-day basis. So you got to be talking to the executive level and finding out if they're still not happy, but satisfied is a better word, I think, with the results they're getting. Most of them won't even know the results they're getting. So you got to work with the people within that client, show them what results they're getting. And that they keep getting them. And that's what I say. So certainly at least once a year, preferably twice a year, you do a major presentation to the executive base.
Mm-hmm.
One more quick example, if you've got of that, if you've got it.
Mm-hmm.
When I first started with IBM, one of the guys had TD Bank as his
The client. Mm-hmm.
as his client. And back then we had all kinds of people. Back then we had whole floors of office buildings filled with computers and air conditioning. I don't know how old you are, Gurmeet, whether you remember that. But that was back in the 70s and even into the 80s a bit, certainly in the 60s. And so you had all kinds of people had to work. You had to, these engineers that had to work on it, and systems engineers did the software. So every year, this guy had TD Bank as his account, would invite the executives over to give them a year roundup, what happened that year and what they're doing. So he did that. And he'd invite over, even the chairman would come then, because IBM really worked from the top down, which I instruct everybody to do when I do it, is start at the top, and they'll tell you who to work with on a day-to-day basis. Where if you start at the bottom and say, hey, by the way, who's your president? Can I call him? They'll usually say no. So start calling at the top. There's one other thing too that people do is that they sometimes wait for people to call them now, with all the searching on the internet now. Find clients that you want to have and go after them before that. Anyway, Harry, I'll call him Harry, that was his first name actually, had the TD account, and he invited them over. And one year, and you give a presentation of what they've done and where they were going and how they had helped them. But he said, what I'd like to do is I'd like to introduce the people who work on your account. Not all of them are full-time on your account, but I'd like to introduce them one by one, tell you their name and what they do. So he did that one by one. He called in everybody, because the meeting was at IBM's offices in the boardroom. And so he called them in and in and in and in. I think it was 85 people he had in the room afterwards. Well, they were blown away. The bank was just blown away with that. And that's something you got to do, is say, hey, let me show you what we do for you. Let me show you the types of what all our people do. Now, accounts payable, the person that came in, that may only be 1 day a week for them, that particular bank, and maybe they work on the 4 other banks too. So, but just the fact that, hey, we're doing something for you, and I did that too. I used to do it with all my clients, so I try and build that in. There's just so many things that you can do that people don't do to solidify the clients and keep them as clients. Sometimes that's the hardest thing. Sometimes it's easier to get a client than it is to keep them, because they got people pounding on their door all the time. And if you're not telling them what you're doing for them, what results they're getting, they're going to keep listening. And eventually they'll say, I don't even know what these guys do for us anymore, other than take my money out of my credit card every day. So, there's so much to selling and managing an account that a lot of people don't do, and it takes hard work, but it's worth it. And then you can start charging more, because you can tell them what results they're getting based on what they're paying. And if you're smart about it, and there is a way to do it, you can do it, as you mentioned before, you can show them the monetary value, that value as opposed to other values, but that real monetary value they're saving or getting by using what you're doing. But you better know what, that too. So that's, I teach all of that stuff. I teach value more than anything, and results, and how you teach people how to get why they get those results, and how to give them more results with other products and services that are called complements, not substitutes, but complements. As I mentioned, popcorn and butter, that kind of thing at a show. That's a minor example, but that kind of thing that people don't look at enough to say, how else can I help you? And you get that by going through one of those meetings with the executives. And that's how you get it. And it's not just what problem have you got now, but what goals have you got, and how can I help you reach those goals? And that's something that people aren't taught. They're not taught. So
very interesting. There's so much to learn from your experiences, Ian, and the knowledge. I learned so much from our conversation. So where can people, I will definitely recommend, if somebody looking to scale up their businesses, give you a call, connect with you, and get your take on it, what they should be doing, and have a chat with you, and maybe you can share perspective with them they haven't looked through, and add value to the business.
I appreciate that. Yeah, of course.
Where can people find you? How can they connect with you?
Well, the best way is just through my website, I guess, my email.
Okay.
Ian at maximizebusinessmarketing.com.
Okay.
And if that's too hard to remember, it's iandainty@gmail.com. So,
okay.
or at Ian Dainty at Rogers. No dot in the middle, just Ian Dainty at Rogers.com or at gmail.com.
Yeah, we send this video to all our contacts in our database, and I'll make sure I'll include those 2 emails in our email as well. So people can click a link and they can just access your website and they can connect with you that way.
Oh, great. Thank you. Yeah,
good stuff.
Great.
Yeah, thank you so much for time. I learned so much from you, and looking forward to our future discussion, Ian. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, Gurmeet, and thank you for asking me.
Okay, thank you. Have a good one.
Have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye.